first-degree murder, and second-degree murder with the intent to terrorize. Those are the two main charges that have been issued by a grand jury in New York against Luigi Mangione, who was the alleged killer of Brian Thompson, a CEO of one of the subsidiaries of United Healthcare. I want to do a report on it right here on Legal AF. Let's talk about the case for a minute. And full disclosure, my podcast colleague and close friend, Karen Friedman-Ignifilo, has agreed to represent Luigi Mangione in the case. We'll be representing him in New York against her old office, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan District Attorney's, and the Police Commissioner, Jessica Titch, announcing the charges, said it was appropriate given the brazen, targeted, and premeditated crime of Luigi Mangione. Now, let me talk to you about what Mangione is looking at in terms of sentencing if he is convicted of these crimes. Then I'll talk briefly about certain defenses. We'll kind of wrap up this hot take on this particular intersection of law and politics. And the politics part is, we have a divide in America. There's a group in America, on social media in particular, that are celebrating is the wrong word, that is honoring Luigi Mangione as a hero for taking on big insurance. There's also a person underneath that, which is a 50-year-old married man with 2 children who worked his way up from being a farm boy to being the head of a subsidiary of United Healthcare and had the misfortune of attending a meeting in New York when he was shot in the back by Mangione. Those are the facts. Everybody can make their own opinion and have their own opinion about it. And that has divided America. Could also divide a future jury. I'm here for the facts. I'm here for, and I think you are too, without blowing smoke or sunshine. If you're, I'm going to talk to you as a New York lawyer. If you're convicted of first-degree murder in New York, you're looking at 3 potential outcomes if you don't get off on some sort of defense, which I'll talk about as well. Life without parole, life imprisonment with parole, or a determinate amount of years between 20 and 25 years in prison. New York does not have the death penalty. There is no death penalty in New York. This is not being prosecuted federally. This is a state crime. And so you have first-degree murder, which is the main charge, although I'll talk to you about the terrorism charge in a minute. If convicted of the second highest charge, that's second-degree murder with a terrorist enhancement, because the New York legislature has said that if a person does something, not just for the thing itself to murder somebody, but in order to create an in terrorem effect, a terror impact on the public at large, or in this case, insurance executives or other types of big business executives, that can lead to an enhancement at the time of sentencing if the facts are proven at time of trial in front of a jury. A 12-person jury in New York has to convict unanimously. That particular crime, second degree with a terrorism enhancement, if you will, can get you life without parole as well. So for the prosecutors, there are many paths to life without parole. Again, no death penalty, even if somehow the terrorism enhancement was shown to the trier of fact, the jury, to be appropriate. Now, there's other accounts that you'll hear about in the media as well. There's criminal possession of a weapon. We know from the facts that it looks like Mangione created his own weapon, a ghost gun, using a 3D printer, his engineering background, and plans that he got online. And he even used his own bullets. And as of right now, it looks like he carved some messaging into the bullets as well, which goes into the premeditation element of it. Now, there's also, he was carrying a fake passport or driver's license. So there's a forged instrument charge in there as well. But the main charges here, of course, the one that is going to drive the prosecutors and drive the defense team led by Karen Friedman-Ignifilo, is the first-degree murder and the second-degree murder with a terrorist enhancement. What are the defenses? Now look, Karen, before she decided even to take the case, had no intention of taking the case, was on CNN doing commentary about the case, which was appropriate given the fact that she worked in that office for 30 years, rising to the number 2 in command, sometimes the acting district attorney at the time. And she said, we've given the mountain of evidence that seems to be developed against that person, Luigi Mangione. She said, we have to get to the bottom, or the defense team would have to get to the bottom of what broke him. Obviously broken. Obviously something broke his mind, right? He goes from being an Ivy League top student, valedictorian of his class from a wealthy family, had all the privileges that life could provide him, that his family could provide him, private school and travel around the world and a trust fund. He has a grandmother that was going to cut him in on a $30 million trust fund. I mean, the family has a lot of money. It's a wealthy Republican family in Baltimore. It owns conservative radio stations, or had owned conservative radio stations. They were the pillars of the Baltimore business and social and civic and religious community. That's the family that it came from. So how did he go from that to coming up with a plan to print a gun, carve messages into bullets, and shooting a CEO in the back on the streets of New York? Something broke within him. And New York recognizes certain mental incapacity defenses that could be used, that can be used in order to defend somebody exactly like Luigi Mangione. And I assume, we don't call it insanity in New York, but I assume some of these defenses will be used to show that the criminal mind that's necessary in order to convict somebody, we call it mens rea, the mental state, criminal mind, could not be formed by Mangione because of this psychological trauma or condition that he was suffering under at the time when he did these things. And he went off grid, right? He's traveling around the world, has this, from reporting, has some sort of debilitating spine, surgical pain issue, which is real. People who have spine and back problems can tell you about the debilitating impact it can have even on your mind and your emotional state, your psychological state. And that's going to be the emphasis, I presume, by the defense. Now, I don't know this from having talked to Karen Friedman-Agnifilo about this case. I speak to Karen Friedman-Agnifilo a lot, but I don't talk to her about the case, and I'm not planning to. This is from my own being a New York lawyer for over 33 years, practicing in these courts and being on the defense side, the criminal defense side for, large portions of my career. So I wanted to give it to you straight from Popok to you right here on Legal AF. That's the news. The new reporting, of course, Luigi Mangione has now been indicted. Some people might say, well, wasn't he charged earlier? Yes, he was charged with what's called an information by the prosecutor, which is the placeholder, is the placeholder for charges until they get a grand jury to indict. But now we have the grand jury actually returning an indictment, and that will lead to an arraignment of Luigi Mangione. And I presume that Karen Friedman-Agnifilo will appear at that time and plead not guilty. And we will take it from there while he remains in custody. Now, right now, I think he's technically in Pennsylvania. His original lawyer said he was going to fight extradition. That's the mechanism by which a fugitive who was picked up in another state is brought to the state to answer charges where he committed the crime or is alleged to have committed the crime. That extradition process, they can fight it, but ultimately, once the governor of the state where the crime is alleged to have happened communicates a request to the governor of the other state, so in this case, Governor Hochul to Governor Shapiro, sister states recognize each other's criminal law, and the person would be extradited. I don't think they're going to continue to fight extradition. I believe that he will be brought to New York, turned over to New York authorities, arraigned in New York, probably held in Rikers Island, which is the main holding jail for people who are charged with crimes in Manhattan. And he will have an opportunity to meet with his lawyer. She will meet him in a room that's designated for that at Rikers Island, where I've been to Rikers Island. It's not a pleasant place for sure, but there is a private room where nobody eavesdrops and nobody records and no videotape. And the lawyer can take notes and bring in some limited materials in a computer. It is able to speak to her client. I believe she's spoken to her client once before in Pennsylvania. She will now speak to her client and start preparing her defense and to take her position in front of her old office. And I'm sure if it hasn't happened already, there will, now that the indictment has happened, there will be a dialogue opened between the defense team led by Karen and the prosecution team led by the person in her old office, who I believe that she knows or had worked with. And they will have some discussions, some preliminary discussions about how they each see this case. And Mangione will stay in I'm sure he'll be arraigned for bail, but my gut is he's not, given the facts as alleged and the videotape, he's not going to be let out on bail. I mean, the family may be willing to put up the entirety of their fortune, but just given the bicycle and the dropping the backpack in Central Park and the creation of the gun and the bullets and the fake IDs, I don't think they're going to let this guy out again before trial. So he'll be pretrial detained in Rikers Island. He'll be brought out for appropriate hearings, and he'll have access to his lawyer. Karen will visit him regularly, and other lawyers affiliated with the case regularly at Rikers Island, and they will begin the process of preparing their defense. The prosecution has an obligation under due process and constitutional requirements to turn over all evidence they have in their possession that they obtain or they develop, whether it's good for the prosecution or bad for the prosecution. Well, if it's good for the defense or bad for the defense, they have to turn it all over. That would be the videotapes, witness statements they may have made, evidence that they have obtained, and anything that's going on in the investigation, the bullets, the casings, and the like, all right down, unfortunately, to the autopsy photos. And so that's where we are. I want to continue to report on it right here, especially on Legal AF and on Michael Popok until my next report about Luigi Mangione. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.